Magic is found in every room, where people connect over a shared purpose. In this weekly podcast, Luke, Hannah and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Hello and welcome to Magic in the Room. I am Luke Freeman.
I am Hannah Broderud.
And I'm Chris Province. And thank you guys. It's good to see you again. Today, we are going to dig back into one of our favorite topics, and that is purpose. I think we're going to dig in and say, what is this thing? Let's revisit this idea. We started this podcast, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, whatever it was. It's been a minute. And, I think thoughts and sentiment about purpose continue to evolve. And I look forward to exploring the idea with you all. So that's what today's episode is going to be about. But before we get started down that path, let's jump into a question of the day. Really simple on the outset, but I think we could get pretty deep on it. And that is, what are you caring about? And I think this is just a good spot to check in with each other. We've been on the road, we've been with clients, everyone's kind of evolving. We see the different business conditions coming about. Kind of where are you at? What are you caring about right now?
I love that question. And I love it for any leader who's wanting to just crack open a conversation in their organization. Either what are you caring about right now, or what should we be giving energy and attention to as a team? I think those are variations of the same question. So just wanted to call that out for listeners. But to actually answer the question, I'm in a season of a little bit of worry. I think everyone has essentially agreed that we're heading into recession this next year. Inflation has definitely hit a lot of households hard. And specifically for wholehearted leaders and purpose-driven leaders, I think the last couple of years have been not just a 1-2 punch, but just like a pummeling that feels like it never stops. And I don't mean, people necessarily being surprised over and over again, but just this idea that the grind has been hard. We've gone through all of these trends of the Great Resignation and quiet quitting and whatever else. But I think, if you boil all of that down, it's this idea that things are hard, especially for people who choose to add on top of their normal job deliverables, caring for the people around them, developing others, and developing organizations and evolving organizations. So I said I'm feeling a little bit worried because I know that the level of tiredness that we're seeing is real. And I'm worried that next year it's not going to let up. And what I'm afraid of is that a lot of the trends that we've seen that have empowered the workforce to say, I don't want to work for that lame boss anymore. I don't want to work for jerks. I want to be in a workplace where we're unified around some sort of shared purpose that is bigger than just trading my dollars for time. I'm participating in something meaningful. I'm afraid that a little bit of oxygen is going to get taken away from that conversation and that fire, and that established businesses, especially some of the market leaders, publicly traded companies, are going to be able to use a recession as an excuse to either go backwards or to stop making forward progress on creating meaningful work. So that's where I am. That's what I'm thinking about. What am I doing about it? We are locally doing a meetup of people who develop other people or develop organizations. Those folks who are, I kind of call them the missionaries of organizations, where they're really outward focused vocationally. They are caring for others. They're kind of organizational caregivers, for the lack of a better term, just for folks to get together and share one another's burdens a little bit, share a little bit about what they're facing. I know for me, being in a room with people who just do similar things helps me remember that we're kind of all facing similar challenges. And I can learn from the other folks and kind of, hey, what conversations are working as you talk to senior leaders, what conversations or what techniques are working as we seek to continue to care for the people and systems inside our organization. So that was a long monologue, but that's what's been on my mind lately, kind of what I'm caring about. And I think we're going to have more of those conversations in the coming year for sure.
Yeah, it sure feels that way. Hannah, what are you caring about?
Yeah, so for me, the big thing that's in front of me is kind of this changing of the seasons. So like quite literally, physically, I live in Montana. It's getting cold. I'm looking outside. It's snowing. It's early November when we're recording this, and there's that ski season is about to start, living near a ski resort. So that's what's on a lot of people's minds around here. It's also kind of, we call it shoulder season here because it's summer season is over. The ski tourist season hasn't opened yet. So it's kind of quiet around town. Some places have closed down for a couple weeks. And so for me, this change of season always comes with a little bit of like melancholy and sense of like loss, like summer's over, it's cold. But it's also for me a really good opportunity to kind of turn inward and reflect. And so that's what I've been just kind of craving lately, just a little bit more downtime, coming off the road, having traveled, done both some business and personal travel. And I'm in kind of those in between seasons, right? Of like, what's next? Feeling the sense of, okay, we're coming towards the end of the year. There's a new season, you know, both literally and metaphorically. So that's kind of getting back to those reflective practices, right? There's less daylight up here in the north, so it's a little darker. You got to kind of create that sense of warmth and light and internal reflection on what's happened over the last year. Where am I at? Checking in. What's on the horizon? How do I want next year? How can I show up intentionally for next year? What are the new challenges, the new opportunities, right, that we can look forward to? And, you know, whereas Luke, I don't disagree in the worry. I think my default is to go to, well, what's positive? Okay, that sounded like a lot of doom and gloom. What do we have to look forward to? So those are some of the questions I'm asking myself too. Like, what are the new opportunities? How do I want to show up in this year that's going to be ahead of us very shortly?
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I relate to where both of you guys are. And I think about, like, really from now until the end of the year, we have this, it feels more like a run up of reflection because we've done our business strategic planning. We've done our client partner strategic planning. And now it's kind of to the personal side of the coin and thinking through, okay, am I on my personal trajectory? Is that going where I want it to go? Reflecting on how, like, who and or what is getting my attention, my affirmations, my affection. You know, where am I spending my time, my talent, my resource? And, you know, how do I want to write that chapter? How do I want to write the 23 chapter? Because the 22 chapter is written or all the momentum is already created. So now I'm looking to, okay, am I good with the current trajectory? Or do I need to make an intervention to write the story I ultimately want to write? So that's really on my mind. And it's really this whole season, like November through the end of the year. It's just where I spend that time as the days get shorter and it's just, yeah, you pull more inward. You're not out and about as much. And so I look forward to that. And I always like, visiting with you all as we go through that process. To your point, Luke, I was speaking to, a general manager yesterday, and he's feeling that idea of sometimes it feels like we're too out of shape to go to the gym. Like we've been beat up on, we've been, we've been grinding, we're still here, we're standing, business is doing well, but like what pulls the nose up ultimately? And I think he made an interesting choice. He's like, our theme for 23 is going to be excellence. We're going to talk about, is this excellent or is it not? And let's put a lens, and we think about, well, excellence wins, right? Like, especially in service and hospitality, you can put that lens on everything and say, is this excellent or is it not? And so I think it becomes a little bit about what we accept and what the last few years has conditioned us to accept as a standard. So I'm going to call kind of to all the courageous leaders out there and say, let's create some more energy around this idea of being excellent. And, that energy looks like, from an accountability standpoint, how leaders flow information, resources, and money throughout their organization. So maybe we think about it in terms of creating energy in order to achieve excellence, and go ahead and give our teams the permission. Hey, let's monitor for excellence. If something's not excellent, let's make it so. And let's, kind of establish or reestablish standards from where we've been, since early 2020. So thank you guys so much for digging into this. Really appreciate knowing where your guys' heads are at as we head into, 2023, and look forward to visiting more about this. So thank you all. All right. So this is something that I always like to do. We were just all three at a conference not too long ago where we covered this topic, and it was really fun to dive in together. So as we left there, I thought, man, let's jump into this in podcast form and really start with this idea of what is purpose. So you guys don't jump up at the same time, but which one of you wants to tackle that one first?
Hey, first off, let me just say, anytime a conference point person says your workshop got the best feedback from participants than any other workshop, we have to make a podcast about it. So that's why everyone's hearing this today. So I want to give us props that we were the best. And you don't get to be the best in many things in life very often. So, hey, we got to celebrate it.
Yeah. Winning's an exception, not the rule, right?
Right. So it's definitely a win. And it's because it's what we do all day, every day, right? Everything we do centers around purpose. So I think it's a great opportunity to just kind of revisit that.
So true. Well, where do you guys shake out on this? What is purpose to you?
I don't know. I think for me, there's a few different ways to look at it, but I like to think of it in terms of the greatest good that we can possibly achieve, right? So for me as an individual, what am I here on this earth to achieve beyond kind of an overarching idea of what is the greatest good I can achieve as a person, separate from what my job role is, what my personal roles might be, right? I think our roles to some extent inform our purpose and vice versa. But I like to think of purpose as kind of beyond all of that, regardless of context, right? What is the thing that I'm here to do? And same for an organization. And we'll get into a little bit of that distinction maybe in a second. But as a company, what's the greatest good that we're here to achieve? Beyond making a profit, making a profit is an outcome of a lot of business processes. There's a lot of outcomes we look for in business. The purpose is a little bit different, right? It's the greatest good. However, we define that, and we get to each define what that is.
Yeah. And I like that distinction of it's the greatest good we can possibly achieve. You know, like an unachievable purpose is not a purpose at all because you can't advance something that can't be achieved. So I think that's an important distinction. Luke, where do you shake out on this idea?
Yeah, so I'm going to say our purpose is the thing that differentiates us. And I don't mean differentiates in a marketing sense, like, oh, that product is differentiated because its value proposition is a little bit different. I mean, differentiates like takes us out of the jumble and says, this is what's special about me. And so there's a couple parts of this discipline of creating purpose. One of them is definition that differentiates us. But then the other part that our purpose helps us with is regulation. So I've defined what is different about me, and then I use that as a North Star to regulate my activity and myself moving in that direction. And I think the same goes for organizations. A shared purpose, a corporate purpose, it is the thing that differentiates us from the crowd. Again, not marketing wise, but this is what's different about who we are and our identity. We define ourselves through our purpose, and our purpose guides us as we continually self-regulate towards that definition that we've created of ourselves.
Yeah. And I think for me, you know, one, I align very much with both where you both are. And then this idea that purpose is the belief that it is the center of our universe, that we forge our families and our relationships and our communities around. And when it's that belief, it does not have to be the leader, right? It does not have to be me, but it is a belief about who I am and what is good that transcends me as an individual and creates a connectivity or a bond between those around me. I like that component of it. And this idea that I have the permission to be black-hearted about advancing my purpose, because there is no greater good. I mean, if I'm really serious about it, there are only two things in my life: behaviors that advance my purpose and behaviors that discount me from achieving it or advancing it. That's it. It puts a lens on everything, and it's my permission to be thick-faced and black-hearted and do the things required to achieve that greatest good. So some nice opening thoughts there on purpose. Any kind of, Luke, anything here in the round table shift where your mind's at?
Yeah, I mean, just playing off what you said about it gives me permission to really be committed, black-hearted about something. Today, just this morning, I was doing continuing ed for a group of therapists. And so I was talking about industrial organizational psychology and some of our methodology and how we help organizations change. And really, we talked a lot about the similarities between family systems and the systems that exist within organizations. But one of the attendees shared this story about a couple that came to see him, and they had their kids had all moved out. So they were recently empty nesters, and they were going through that typical, like, well, what is our relationship now? And who are we? And do we need each other? Because our kids were the shared purpose, successful, out of the nest kids who are out taking flight. That was the purpose. Well, now what is it? And so they went through an exercise and said, what are the things that we value and what's the vision that we share, and created a personal mission statement, a purpose statement for that married couple. And what that does, I'm just illustrating your point here, is that it allows them to say no to things that don't align with that shared purpose. So we can't have an identity. We can't know who we are until we know who we aren't. And when you hear Chris say, or Chris, when I hear you say, gives me permission to be black-hearted about some things, what I hear you saying is it gives me clear boundaries of what's inside my best practice of where I'm going, right? And what's outside. There's a clear boundary there. There's clear barriers, or at least more clear than without a shared purpose, so that we know where to direct our energy and where to resist.
Yeah. And I think the idea is how can a relationship advance without a purpose or a shared purpose binding that relationship, whether that's organizationally or between two married people or between a family or a community, you know, a nonprofit. I mean, it just kind of goes on and on and on. That purpose is that thing in the middle to rally around. So how do you have a healthy version of things if everything is like tacit? If nothing is explicit and everything is just, it is what it is, we go about our days. I mean, Hannah, what are your thoughts around that? That whole tacit versus explicit purpose between, you know, relationally.
Clarity is always helpful, right? So making things explicit and really taking the time to identify what it is. But I think there's a lot of, I mean, we talk about how purpose always exists, right? And that's maybe how I think of the tacitly, we do our purpose, whether we're aware of it or not. But because we're interested in intentional leadership, what does it mean to be intentional about purpose? To some extent, we have to make it explicit, right? And so that's where that taking the time to reflect, doing the exercise of getting clear on what is it. And it's partially, it's an excavation, a discovery of something that already is. The other part of it is making a decision on this is what it is, right? And this is how I want to show up. This is what we want to be known for. This is, you know, and the other definition of purpose that we didn't talk about yet is simply the reason something exists, right? And we've kind of skirted around it. And that is, maybe that's something that is like divine and God-given and exists, whether we have a choice in it or not, or maybe we do get to have a choice in that. And maybe that's a chicken and egg question. I don't know. Maybe it's a little of both, right? Maybe it's already in it. And the more clear we get on it, we get to actually choose to be intentional of living and how we're going to live that out.
Yeah, I want to come back to that idea of like, is purpose created, discovered, or built? I want to come back to that idea, but I want to handle one technical thing first, which is kind of like we talk about in terms of shared purpose. When we talk about shared purpose, that's going to apply to a team, an organization, a community, a family. It's that group environment, and that shared purpose is really defining or making explicit what that group is, what they exist to accomplish. And, you know, we call these things different things. So it can be a mission. It can be a vision. It could even be called a purpose. It's this idea, it's any articulation that is intended why this entity exists and the impact it seeks to make on the world. Like, that is the thing. So this whole argument about mission, vision, purpose, blah, any explicit articulation of why you exist and the impact you want to have, generically, that's the purpose, right? And so then we get down to those two behaviors. There's things that advance it, and there's things that discount from it. But then we speak to, you know, the personal or the individual purpose, right? And what do I exist to accomplish? And that's for each person to kind of, what, you know, like you said, Hannah, it's like excavate it, mine it, build it, grow it, advance it. Total inside job. But I think about the organization that we all, you know, work as, And at Purpose and Performance Group, like we exist as an organization, specifically us three and Ben behind the camera and the microphones over there. We exist to make the world better for everyone by developing healthy, purpose-driven organizations. That is our shared purpose as a business entity and what we seek to accomplish every day collectively. But then when we think about our individual purpose, like I know way back when we started, we put our explicit words down, but I'm interested to know, where are you at today? How have those words changed, and what words are you currently using to describe your individual purpose?
Yeah, for me, it hasn't. The words haven't really changed much. Maybe how I express them a little bit. For me, it ties to a belief. We've talked a little bit about belief, right? So there's a core belief kind of that informs my purpose, and that belief is that I believe there is greatness and beauty in everyone. And so for me, my purpose in life is to make a positive impact on people by helping to bring out the best in them. And more specifically, if I put an action on it, right, I look for light. I look for the light in every person, and I invite their greatness to shine. And so those are words I've used for a while, and they still have that meaning, but it's really about connecting, looking for what's great about somebody, looking for not. So the question that I ask myself or try to ask myself isn't, does this person have value? It's like, in which way can this person contribute value? Is this person intelligent? No, the question is, in what way is this person intelligent? Is this person beautiful, attractive? No, in which way is this person beautiful? Because for me, I want to find that because I believe it's there in everyone. And sometimes you got to look a little harder. In other areas, you see it because maybe it connects that with you in a way that's obvious, right? In other ways, we have different personalities, different chemistries. So when I live my purpose and when I'm being intentional about that, I look for what's great about somebody and help. And I try to connect with it and help to amplify that. It's a long way to say it, lots of words, but that's the same central idea.
Now, what about you, Luke?
Yeah, my words haven't changed a lot either since the last couple of years that we've been talking about this. I have had several statements before that, but I've really kind of landed on this idea that I invite individuals, teams, organizations into whatever is next for them. So the core belief behind that is that there's latent potential inside every person, inside every team, inside every organization to continue to grow and develop. And also a belief that there are clear kind of emerging developmental stages that are available to everyone. And so if we can set the conditions, that potential is going to flourish and come out. And so, yeah, I invite leaders, teams, individuals, organizations into what's next for them. And I love getting to do that every day. So that's mine. How about you, Chris?
Yeah, I'm similar in that, my words haven't changed that much, but I think I've maybe just ratcheted up the intentionality on them a bit in calling for this default setting of leaders to be courageous. And so my purpose is this idea that I exist to connect with courageous leaders in meaningful ways to advance their intention, purpose, and gratitude, right? Like that's really what I feel I'm here to do, because I meet a lot of leaders that just want to connect. They need somebody to, bounce ideas off of, have a cup of coffee with, talk about business, and just sharing time, sharing space, creating that connection, that relationship of trust where maybe we can explore some ideas together. What would happen if? Is there a world where those conversations yield results? And that's where this belief that leadership is a conversation, and the more we have them, the healthier things become. So it's kind of the language that I'm using now, and it seems to be working well. I'm fulfilled by defining my work that way. But there's this idea, like, am I creating that? Am I discovering that? Did I build that? I mean, where do you shake out on all of this?
Well, I think some of the things that we all shared are a great example of this idea that a personal purpose, and I think this applies to shared purpose as well, is as much a process or maybe more of a process than a goal. So for you to say it's connecting with courageous leaders so they can fulfill their purpose, that sounds like a goal if you take it at face value. But in reality, I know that the way you live that out every day is that it is a process. It shapes the process of you continually differentiating yourself to be more and more focused on that personal purpose. And the same goes for me. Yes, I say I invite individuals, teams, organizations into what's developmentally next for them. I do that now. That is a behavior. It sounds like a goal, but it also is a process of me living into that, finding more opportunities to spend more of each of every one of my days directly fulfilling that purpose in more direct ways and in more impactful ways. So that's where I land. I do think it's nice to have words. It's fine if they change. It's good to know if I'm in the center of my purpose or outside of it. And understanding that it's not a destination, it's a journey, it's a highway. I am on the highway of learning how to best invite people into growth. That's my purpose.
Well, and I would call out, like, when we, in going through our individual purpose, like, there's not any of them that are singular. It's about connection and advancing purpose, intention, gratitude, or inviting the light within people to shine. Like, that looks a lot of different ways. And so I think people get hung up on this idea of, like, here's this one purpose, and, yes, I do have this sense of adventure and this overarching calling, but some people aren't called the same way. They might have a more defined thing, and, like, I want to do this, and that's also fulfilling. So purpose does not have to be singular. It doesn't have to be one thing. It doesn't have to be all the things. But also, I might have a different purpose as a father or in a role versus in a professional role. So this idea that, I don't have to have the pressure to have an overarching singular purpose. When I think about ours, they're all pretty broad. We can approach, inviting that light to shine, or inviting them to what's next, or connecting in meaningful ways. That can look a lot of different ways. I think an important thing to remember is, or to keep in mind, my purpose as a parent might differ from my purpose as a professional. My purpose as a parent might be to ensure my kids' safety and social desirability. That could be one. I could have multiple. I could have a purpose as a brother or as a son. I don't have to view purpose as singular or that I just have one. But again, it's that anything that makes it explicit and gives me some sort of North Star to follow.
Yeah, I think the danger there is getting into a scenario where you can justify anything. Like, oh, here's another purpose of mine. And, oh, this person asked me to do this thing. And yeah, that feels like a good thing to do. So I hear what you're saying. And for me, what has been most helpful is making the switch from saying, I need to keep my kids safe, I need to invest in them, I need to whatever, to saying, how do I invite them into what's next that's unique for each of the three of them? So the more I can apply the thing that really drives me, that really gets me out of bed, that's built on my core beliefs and my very literally DNA, if you believe the science, my purpose is probably an outcome of some of my DNA that drives my personality. The more I can tap into that really basic human energy that's inside me, the more effective I can be, rather than trying to say, oh, and here I'm this and here I'm that, and over in this other context, I'm this other thing.
Yeah, I had another conversation earlier today about, role clarity and purpose clarity and which comes first. And it's a little bit of maybe a chicken and egg question, but as we think about the different roles that we play, do we have a different purpose for each of them? And to some extent, purpose can be contextual, right? There's a purpose for this meeting. There's a purpose for this podcast. And with this podcast, because it's part of the overall work that we do, that overarching purpose of, making the world better for everyone through the development of healthy, purpose-driven organizations, that's still part of the purpose of this podcast, even though it may have a little bit more of a specific purpose, right? Because it's a different forum, it's a different role that we play when we're on this podcast versus when we're consulting with an organization. I think about how you shared your purpose, Chris, about connecting in meaningful ways, right? So thinking about how does that purpose inform your role as a father, right? Connecting with your children in meaningful ways, and knowing you, that's one of the things that I see you do very naturally. So I do believe there's an element of, there is an overarching purpose that informs how we show up in our different roles, right? And the way I think about my purpose of inviting, making a positive impact by bringing out the best in people, looking for light, right? That starts for me with my family and those I love, including my close friends. It extends to team members, to colleagues, the two of you and our team at Purpose and Performance Group. It extends to clients and anyone else to whom I can provide value, right? That's how I kind of have defined it for myself. Like in all these different roles, how can I live that purpose? Now, in each role, maybe there's I don't know how to think about it. Maybe it's a sub-purpose, or it's a more specific purpose for this particular role or this particular assignment or this particular project. So yeah, I think I agree with you that purpose isn't necessarily singular. I think when we talk about personal purpose, for me, that does mean kind of an overarching purpose that informs all the different roles that I take on in life.
Yeah, and I think part of that is identifying what's permanent in life, because those are anchors, and really paying attention to life transitions, because that's probably where some of the things we believe were permanent might change, right? But then those create opportunities for additional reflection. So it's not like purpose is static. Like, we can evolve them over time, because while our DNA may not change, Luke, our conditions do. Some things about life are very permanent. Some things about life transition, and some things are fleeting. There's in seasons. There are roles that I explore, and there's roles that I accept. And, how I want to approach life in a given time is very much like I get to decide that. I get to decide what purpose to advance. And that is that autonomy that I think is really fulfilling. I think the most damage, me personally, like, I suffer when I don't have it. When I don't have the thing to advance, I don't have direction. It's very difficult for me to achieve if I don't know what I'm trying to do. And unless I make it explicit, I don't know where to go. Now, some other people might be very fulfilled without those things, and that's fine. I live my own story, not anyone else's. So, that's something I would say about, is purpose static? Is it not? But I'm really interested in, like, how do you keep it fresh? How do you avoid maybe things being stagnant if you're just trying to do the same thing every day? And then really, Luke, if you can touch on specifically like how, like what you have to let go of and what you have to embrace as you go through the purpose journey.
Yeah, that's a great question. Letting go of things, I believe, is central to it. It's central to the journey. There's a quote by Edwin Friedman, who was a family therapist, but then also moved into consulting for communities of faith and then consulting for organizations and doing wider leadership consulting. This was in the 80s and 90s. Has a great book, A Failure of Nerve. And he says that this idea of differentiation, which I think is very similar to when we create our purpose. Remember, I said creating a purpose is an exercise in differentiating ourselves from those around us. He says it's a concept that can sometimes be difficult to focus on objectively. For differentiation means the capacity to become oneself and have minimum reactivity to the positions or reactivity of others. And I think that piece where we become less reactive to the needs, the positions, the reactions, the states of other people is central to this journey of differentiating ourselves by clarifying our own purpose. And by nature, when we become less reactive to the needs of others, and don't hear me say we don't meet the needs of others or we don't contribute to the lives of other people. That's not what I'm saying. But when we become more purposeful and less reactive, it does mean a different relationship with those people. It does mean saying no to things that don't align with our purpose. It does mean other people having to recalibrate how they connect with and interact with us, because we have done the work now to differentiate ourselves and have clear boundaries around what is my purpose and what am I here to do and what am I not here to do. And we see this in organizations all the time. A large reason why CEOs, founders, leadership teams hesitate, they kind of get up to the line, but then don't cross it on clarifying a clear shared purpose, is that it almost always means losing some people who are current team members. It almost always means when we say this is what we stand for, the people who don't stand for that will leave. The same is true in our personal lives. When we say this is what I stand for, there are going to be people that don't stand for that. And if you're someone that everyone's got to love you, and you've got to be like everyone's best friend forever to feel good about yourself, this exercise of clarifying your own personal purpose can be very difficult and very painful. And there's a lot of letting go.
Hannha, if you can speak towards like transitions and maybe how do you kind of anchor back to it through transition? Is it something you reevaluate through transition? How do you kind of process that?
Both. I would say being clear on personal purpose is the greatest tool for any life transition because it's such an anchor. And so recognizing, and I'm with you, I got to keep things fresh. And when things get static and I get bored, like when I get to a certain level of mastery, I got to learn the next thing or do the next thing, right? So for me, it can never be doing the same thing over and over, right? And purpose to me has nothing to do with doing. The things that I do are informed by the purpose and the choices that I make. Like I use my purpose as a both forward-looking way to help make decisions on what's next, also a retrospective of evaluating my own performance, how I show up. I'm reading right now the book, The Power of Regret by Daniel Pink, which is really interesting because it's about like, okay, what are the things in life that we regret and what do we learn from those? And I think when you're clear on your purpose, that can be regret can be a really helpful tool because you can look at whether or not that particular decision or life change or, transition that you went through, how you responded to it, was it aligned with your purpose or not? But I think it's both. Chris, you asked, yes, I use purpose to help inform transitions of how I respond to changes in life and how I move forward. I think purpose also, inevitably you reevaluate purpose through those transitions, right? So it's a little bit of a both and, but for me, it's more of it's that we've used the word North Star, right? It helps me kind of stay the course, even when context changes, big and small life transitions. And right now, as in our question of the day, as we're in this kind of liminal space of season change, it's a good time for me to anchor back to the purpose and say, how can I look for light in other ways, in more ways, in different ways, in more impactful ways?
That's awesome. Amen. And let's, I love being on the journey with you guys. Now let's speak to where's this all headed from a corporate organization standpoint. What's it mean for leaders? I'm trying to get my business or my team firing on all cylinders. How do I create the right tension with this? How do I create the conversation around it? I know there's a lot of mission, vision, values, things like that floating around. Where are we with all that? What's the kind of call to action for leaders as we look to 23?
Yeah, so I would say just kind of brief sketch there is that the status quo is that there's a very undefined shared purpose. Whether it's because no one's done the work before, and so there isn't any sort of language around why we exist, or because there's some poster on the wall somewhere that someone did the work 5 or 10 years ago, but everyone knows it's window dressing. Everyone knows it doesn't have teeth. Decisions aren't made based on that. I think where the market wants to go from a workforce standpoint is more and more people are wanting to have clear shared purpose in the organizations where they work that they can opt into or opt out of, and go somewhere where their efforts and their values align more. Now, when I say that that's a pressure in the market and more people are doing it, I'm not saying, oh, wow, now most businesses have a really clear shared purpose. That's not the case. It still is a rarity. Even as this becomes more and more understood and spoken to in popular management literature, in popular management research, Harvard Business Review, wow, in the last year, how many articles about corporate purpose? Probably a dozen. It has been one thing after the other. And I completely believe that the scholars who are writing those, many of them are also practitioners, that they believe in the power of shared purpose. What we see, though, is that most, especially publicly traded organizations who attempt to do purpose work, fall into a lot of familiar traps and end up doing something that people are calling purpose washing right now. Just like folks doing environmental work, responding to the needs of the market or the needs of investors, have engaged in greenwashing or diversity washing if there are those needs. So is that happening? Are people engaging with purpose in a transactional way? Yes, absolutely. Just like with greenwashing, just like with diversity washing, I think the workforce and I think consumers are pretty savvy about it. So we are at this moment in history, and I don't mean right now, this particular year, but I do mean probably this decade, that I think will be an inflection point where the next generation of leaders understand that this is a basic function of an organization, is that we need to know who we're for, who we're not for, what we stand for, so that people, whether they're consumers or employees, can opt in or opt out. But I think it's going to be a painful journey. And this goes back to my fears and the question of the day. I think if the economic landscape gets difficult in the next 2, 5, 75 years, then we could see a slowdown of the trend. And that's a bit of what I'm worried about, because I do think giving people the chance to opt in or out is a really positive thing.
Right. It only works if you're not indentured, right?
Yeah.
That's a critical piece of this. And, there's another function of people know more about what they want than we know about what they want. It's, we say, the person that's in there to buy shoes knows way more about the shoes they're after than what we do as the company trying to sell them to them, right? And that there's, by the same token, the team members that want to buy in to this and they want to be part of that community-based workforce, they're going to know a lot about what they're looking for. Mm-hmm. And if we do not have or have a shared awareness of what that might be, then we are at a heavy disadvantage as it relates to attracting and retaining talent as an organization. So all things that have to be measured and intentional, about how we go about those things. But I think the conversation continues. Hannha, where are you at on this? What's it mean for leaders and organizations?
I believe there's no better time to get clear on your shared purpose than right now. We've talked about transition points, right? And to Luke's point, yes, I think we're at an inflection point coming off of the pandemic and the disruption that happened and how a lot of things got shook up, right? Both inside organizations had to get innovative again. Large organizations had to start operating more as startups and operate in more agile ways as kind of decision power shifted, and whoever could come up with a solution to the problem had the opportunity to do that. So there was a lot more kind of ground floor innovation that happened. And now we're in this kind of, things are kind of settling down from the pandemic. And a lot of organizations, I think, are finding themselves in this space of it. Again, it's a liminal space. It's a season change. Okay, things aren't what they used to be, and they're not yet what they could be. Right now is that space, right? We're in transition, we're in a liminal space, and now is the time to take the time to reflect, get clarity reflect on the truth in the story, on the journey we've been on. What have we learned? When have we been at our best? What is our identity, and what parts of that do we want to move forward into the future? And let's get intentional about who we want to be, why we exist, what is the greatest good we can achieve. Because to your point, Chris, about retention, right? Everybody's struggling with attracting and retaining talent as individuals have gone through the same transition, right? Who do I want to be? Like, I'm in this liminal space. I know I don't want to go back to what used to be, right? I want something new. And maybe they're clear on what they want. I know for sure that they'll know it when they see it. And so unless organizations are really clear on what they believe and who they are and what their purpose is, they're not going to be able to connect with people who are looking for that, or who may not even know that that's what they're looking for, but they won't know until they see it.
And I think that's a really important note, because what we know as social scientists is that people's behaviors tell us a lot more than their words. So do not fall into the trap as an owner, as an executive leader, of doing some sort of listening tour or survey to say, how much do you care about shared purpose? How much do you care about giving back to our community? Whatever it is, because people will say that the finances are what they care more about. They say that, right? It's very similar to what people say about recognition. They'll put on a survey, I prefer to get a $50 gift card that I can use on gas over a $50 thing that's really cool that I would never buy for myself. But the science shows they will work harder for the $50 thing they would never buy for themselves because they feel morally obliged to say, yes, I want the gas card because that's what I should do, because then I can take care of my family and buy groceries and be a responsible human being. Similar with purpose. People are going to say, I don't know, like work is work. I get my fulfillment outside of work, right? But the science shows that organizations with clear shared purpose outperform the S&P, outperform their competition. Their employees are more engaged. They are more successful on almost every performance measure. So I promise you, people want it. And when they experience it, they get a taste of it. They don't want to go back. So not understanding what being in a purpose-driven organization is like is very different than not wanting to be in a purpose-driven organization. And then the second thing I'll say too, just to tack on here, is that if you are in one of those organizations where there's no poster on the wall, or the poster on the wall everyone knows is window dressing, it doesn't mean that there's not a shared purpose. What I would bet money on, though, is that the unspoken shared purpose is to continue at acceptable margins. That's why we're all here. That's why we all get out of bed. Because a year from now, we want to still be around and be making acceptable margins so that we can continue to do it another year after that. And I think that applies to people as well, individuals. If you don't have a clear personal purpose, my guess is you're making decisions based on a purpose that's something like, I want to be stable on my trajectory to continue at acceptable financial margins. And my question, both for those individuals and for organizations, is, do you really think that's the best you can do in living a meaningful life and providing value for all of your stakeholders as an individual or as a business?
Yeah. And I'll kind of wrap us up here with this idea that when we activate purpose, when we chart a course, it creates a singular focus and a level of clarity that eliminates wasteful and unhelpful activity. There's the world. Things are helpful or not helpful. And that's why high purpose organizations build value 4 times faster than organizations that are low purpose. So if we want to create value for our organizations, anchor to the thing that provides clarity, let people really focus, like what gets my attention, what gets my time, talent, and resource. Help put up those ideas and beliefs about, this is what we focus on around here. This is what facilitates the growth of our community. That's why high purpose organizations have more worker productivity. They experience higher revenue growth. There's safety benefits. And it just gets us out of this transactional leadership that's just drudgery and misery and that nobody really wants to be around. So let's leave that for the other people, and let's go out and create organizations that are healthier, purpose-driven, and create a ton of value, not just for their shareholders or stakeholders, but for the community that resides within them. So thank you guys so much for exploring purpose. So, we've got to revisit kind of our anchor belief, about what is important. So I'm thankful for today. I'm thankful for the conversation, and thank you all for speaking into my life and being North Stars for me. So Luke, Hannah, thank you very much. Until next time, let's go win the day.
Thanks, everybody. Talk soon.
Until next time. Thank you, everyone.
Magic in the Room is hosted by Chris Province, Hannha Bretterow, and Luke Freeman, and produced by Ben West. Theme music is by Evan Grimm. title track Fake Love, available on Apple Music. And this podcast was recorded at Storycatcher Studio with video and audio editing and production support by Brad O'Hara and Alicia Crum, with inspiration, strategy and technical support by yours truly, Neil Hughes. Magic in the Room is a production of Purpose and Performance Group. You can find us at purposeandperformancegroup.com, and remember, previous episodes are available at magicintheroom.com.